Hey there! Today we are going to create ReactContext in Typescript to solve the tab menu issue. Let me first explain this issue. If we switch between the pages using the tab here, we can recognize which page is active from the style of its tab and the yellow stroke underneath. And if we refresh the whole page, we can see that the tab is still active, but this is in our finished project. Now let's move to our new project and check this issue. From here we can see that it is working correctly because the state of React is still saved in the memory of the browser. But if we refresh to the whole page, we can see the home tab is active while the page is the products. Let's see the code or the state managing this tab. This is the state changing between these tabs, and it is only local state for this component. We need to create a global state for this tab to be accessed from all pages. So let's go to the types folder. But first I'm gonna show you something I forgot to mention it in the last video. When the field is optional and not required, we have to add this question mark here to mention that it is not required. So there will be no warnings if the object doesn't include any of these fields. Now let's create types for our context. Let's create here enum type. It is like saving static values. Here we are going to mention the names of our actions, and the name of our first action will be update page tab. And during building our project, we are going to add many actions here. Now let's create type action. And the first one for updating our page tab, it will have type, and the type, it will be the action name we've just created. And the payload of the action, it must be number, because the tab state is using number to control and switch between these tabs. And later when we need another action, we will add here or and create another type. It must include the field type, but sometimes there is payload and some actions doesn't need payload. So it depends on the action which fields we are going to add here. But for every action we are going to add here type, as well as we are going to add name here. Now let's add type for the state. The first property is page tab, and it must be number. Save the types here and go to the main folder and create a new folder for the context. Inside it, the context provider, make sure that it is .tsx, not just ts. We will receive the children, and the children from type gsx.element, and we will retain these children after providing them with the context value. We will replace this div in a moment with the context provider. So first let's create initial state. For the initial values, it is from type state, and the initial value for the page tab is 0, that is the main page. Now let's create the context. We will use createContext from React. Typescript is complaining because this context needs to know which values we are going to pass. So let's create type for the context value. We are going to pass the state, and it is from type state, and also the dispatcher, and it is from type dispatch from React, and specific action is our type action. Now let's add the type of the values here. And let's pass here initial values. First one state, it will be this initial state. And the dispatcher, for now, let's assign it an empty function. We need now to create reducer. So let's create a new file. Let's call it reducer. And let's create the function. we will receive two parameters, state, and it is from type state, and action from our type action as well. And this function will retain state. Let's export it. And let's add here switch instruction. The key, it will be action.type. In the default case, when there is no matching action, let's retain the same state. And let's add our first case. When we update the page tab, we will retain the same state, and we will update the field page tab with the payload of the action. Let's save here and go back to the context provider. And let's create state and dispatch using the hook useReducer from React. And we will pass it our reducer and our initial state. Now let's add here the provider. And the value of this provider, it will be an object of our state and the dispatcher. Now all the children components will get access to this value, state and the dispatcher. But we need to go to the app and wrap all the components with this provider. Let's add it here. And let's add box from material UI and drag all these components inside it. Now the layout and all pages will get access to these values. Let's save here and go to our component tabs nav. And let's remove this local state and replace it with our global state. So we need page tab, and we will access it using our hook useContext value. I think I forgot to create this context or to export it, so let's go back to our context provider. I didn't create it at all, so let's create it here. Let's call it useContext value, and it is just function to retain useContext from React. And let's pass it the context we've just created here. Let's save here and go back, and let's use this hook here. We need also the dispatcher to control and set this state. Now this value is the global state, and let's replace this set page tab with the dispatcher. This new value, it will be the payload of the action, and the type of the action, it will be update page tab. So let's save and check that it is still working the same as before. It's working the same, it is still switching between these tabs and also the pages. But now we need to solve the problem of refreshing the whole page. We need to add use effect on all pages. For products, we need to add it in this component, because this component we are going to use it as well in the search page, and we need the products tab to stay the active one. So let's extract the dispatcher from the global context using our hook useContext value. And let's add the use effect here. In the first render, we will change the state of the page tab using the dispatcher. Type of the action is action type dot update page tab, and the payload, it will be 1. Here the warning, we need to add the dispatch. Don't always trust React in these warnings, because sometimes it creates loop, but let's add the dispatcher here, it is okay. And let's save here and copy this code and use it in another pages. We don't need to use it in the home page because the default is 0. We need it in about page. So let's paste it here. The index of about page tab is 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's update the value here to 3. And let's import all of these objects. Let's save here and go to account page. and let's paste the whole code here. The value is 2, and let's import all of these. Now let's save and go to check the issue of refreshing the whole page. Let's refresh. The active tab is still account. We solved the problem using React Global Context. To check it also for other pages. It's working in products. And also let's try it for about. It is perfect. In the next video we are going to work on the search feature. So see you guys in our next video.